Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Playbook for Leaders and Entrepreneurs. Today, I'm beyond excited to welcome Octavia Goredema to the podcast. Octavia is an award winning author, career coach, and the founder who helps professionals unlock their full potential at work. She's the host of the Audible original Brand Yourself for Success and How to Change Careers. And she also writes for Harvard Business Review on career growth and leadership. Octavia's insights and lessons have deeply resonated with me and continue to inspire the way I think about growth and success. I cannot wait for her to share her journey, her wisdom, and strategies she uses to empower others to step forward in their careers with clarity and confidence. So, Octavia, I am really honored to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
My goodness, Sid, what a warm welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
You're welcome. And I think 2, 3 months ago, I heard the Brand Yourself for Success book, and I was like, wow, this is so good. I have to get you on, and we are here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to my Audible original. It means the world to me. Often when you're creating something, you're kind of just doing it from the heart, and you have no idea how it might connect with others. So I really appreciate you reaching out after you listened.
Yes, I loved it, and it's a must listen for anyone who's serious about their careers. So let's kick off. If you could give us a little more insights about your personal life and your business, so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more.
Of course. Well, as you mentioned, so eloquently, thank you. I am an author and a career coach and the founder of a career content company called Fire Memos. Um, and I'm joining you today from Los Angeles. Um, California is now my home, but my journey didn't start there. Didn't start with writing books or creating audibles or coaching professionals or building startups. It actually began back in the UK. I am a politics and economic and social history graduate from the University of Leicester. And as I was completing my studies, I was really focused on building a career in communications. Now, the irony is, all of the work that I do is actually communications, but at that time, I thought I was going to be building a more conventional corporate career, working in public relations, and that's what I started off doing. And I learned a lot. Um, that work is what brought me to the United States for the first time 5 years after I graduated. I moved from London to Los Angeles. And that was really a turning point for me. There have been so many different moments that were turning points in my career journey. We all have them. Some of them are big moments, and then some of them are actually maybe a conversation or an insight or an experience that just changes how you think about yourself and your potential. And coming to the United States, and specifically coming to Los Angeles, which is 5,000 miles from London and 8 hours time difference, and felt like a whole other universe. Even though in theory we speak the same language, actually, I spent the first few weeks, especially on conference calls, not being able to understand what I was hearing because the accents, the phrases, the vocabulary, the context, I was just eyes wide, like, okay, I've got to really lock in and focus. And being out of my comfort zone, not having a network, not knowing how to get from one place to the other, um, not understanding the currency. It sounds so simple, but I really struggled with coins at the beginning. So I was like, which one is which? It took a while for that to click. All of these things felt immense. And I look back on that because it really was a period where I had to really, really trust myself and absorb and be ready to level up. And I think we all have moments, whether it's starting a new job or trying something new for the first time or taking on a big responsibility or moving like I did, which really require you to learn so much more about yourself when everything that is familiar or that you think you know is stripped away. So I started working in public relations and working my way up the career ladder. And I made a pivot to leave all of that behind and become a coach. And it was after I was coached for myself the first time, and I'd never even heard of coaching. It wasn't something I was actively seeking. I went to an event and there were four people on the panel, and one of them in particular just stood out for me so much. And I just said to my friend, I want to find a way to work with that woman. And that person was a coach. And she and I connected, and she ended up coaching me. And that changed everything. And I realized throughout my career up until that point, the pieces that had excited me the most were two things. I'd started to build teams by that point. So it was when I was able to really invest in the professional development of others, and whenever I had the opportunity to write. And often there wasn't always the opportunity to write freely in my job. So I was often finding ways to share what I knew with my own blog or on websites. And it was those two strands that really unlocked so much for me. And so, yes, I made the pivot, and that's what brought me to the work that I'm doing today.
Amazing. Wow. I can resonate because coming from India to the UK, so I can resonate a few bits there. I've got a perfect transition to the question I want to ask you about pivot. So from your Audible original How to Change Career series and your book with Harvard Business Review, so I want to ask you, what are the top strategies for professionals navigating major career transitions or bouncing back after a setback?
Yes. So I talked about the big pivot I made in terms of leaving a career that I'd built to try something new. But even before that, I personally made other pivots. I remember earlier in my career, I wanted to change from doing public affairs and corporate public relations and lobbying to consumer PR. And at the time, that felt like a seismic shift. And remember my boss at the time saying, think really carefully, Octavia, because if you make this change, it won't be easy to go back. Now, I don't think I 100% agree with that sentiment, even though it was shared with the best of intentions, because what he was trying to say to me was, you're good at what you do and you're on a path. Why leave? But if there's something that you know really feels aligned for you, and you haven't fully experienced it yet, but you're really curious about it, explore it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take a full leap blindly. It could be that you explore it by having conversations with others that are already immersed in that space. It could be by practicing or dipping your toe in or trying components of it. There are lots of ways to explore. It could be having informational interviews before you actually apply for opportunities. And if it's actually pivoting into something that's out of being employed and doing something on your own terms, yeah, talking to people who are 3 years, 5 years, 10 years ahead of you in that space about, because sometimes the grass is greener, but also sometimes there are components to their journey that won't necessarily be the same for you, but you can learn from. And you can either choose to embrace those things or do them slightly differently. So I think it's about making sure that you're asking questions constantly and also knowing you do not have to fit in a box. There'll be components of you that you start to learn more about as you try things, and learning what you don't like and don't want to do is so valuable because it helps you get clearer about what you really want to do. I think very early in our careers, we're trying to be really good all rounders, right? We're trying to absorb as much as we possibly can and we're laying foundations. And then there comes a time where you have to really lean into your zone of genius. You have to really lean into the components that make you stand out, whatever it is you're pursuing, because that's where your superpowers are when you really play to your strengths. And so, if making a shift supports that, get curious, ask questions, and then try.
Love that answer. I love it. Thank you for sharing, Octavia. I have another question based on your book that was called Brand Yourself for Success. And you mentioned
Yes.
there, with over 74% of hiring managers using social media to screen candidates, and LinkedIn noted as well that people with strong personal brands get approached more for job opportunities. So, my question to you is, what are the key things we should focus on when building an authentic personal brand online?
So, yes, there were so many people in my network who have had opportunities come their way that they didn't know about. And the reason those opportunities came their way is because they were discoverable. Sometimes they were discoverable because someone was literally searching for someone who has their skill set and expertise, and their LinkedIn profile or personal website, if they have one, came up. Other times it was because their name was shared with someone who was looking for what they could do. And so embracing what you do well and making sure that people can find you is the first thing. Some people think sometimes, oh, I have to be posting all the time. That's not necessarily true at all. Just having a presence that someone can go and find if they're looking for someone like you is the first thing. It's the first thing. And then the authenticity piece that you mentioned, um, energy and interests are so tangible. If someone is really interested in something, it shows in a conversation. If someone enjoys doing a certain type of work and when they talk about it, that resonates. And so if there are things that you have done that you are proud of, if there are things that you're working on that you're enjoying, if there are insights that you have from something that you've just completed, share them. Talk about them with your peers. Post about them. Talk to people in your organization that are a few years behind you about what you're working on. There's so many ways that you can convey what you do well and what you've learned with authenticity because that experience is yours. And I think sometimes people feel, oh, but I've only been doing this for so long, or, oh, but isn't this just my job to know how to do this? Now, that's fair, but you also have to remember there's always someone looking at you, even if you feel like you're just figuring out your next step, or you've just landed that opportunity, or you really want a promotion, you haven't gotten it yet. There's always someone who's looking at you where you are right now in this moment and wishing they had that opportunity.
That I have a follow-up question on that. So do you recommend like people who already have a job, a full-time job, is it both for them to create a personal brand online as well? Or it's more for people who are looking for a graduate job after university?
I firmly believe maintaining your own brand is valuable regardless of what stage you're in. It's just as important in a role that you're in, even if you're not looking to leave, but just for people who you work with and alongside and the customers or clients that you support or the audiences that you engage with. Know you and who you are and what you do best. If anything, it's even more valuable to be thinking this way when you don't think you need an opportunity, because you're building trust. What do you want people to know about you? If you are not in a meeting and your name come up, how would you want a coworker to describe you? How would you want your manager to describe you? How would you want your manager's manager to describe you? I'll give you an example. I'm a career coach and, I coach professionals who have just started their careers, who are like a few years into their careers. And I also coach professionals at C-suite, in the C-suite at Fortune 500 companies, a whole range. I had an early career professional that I was supporting, and an opportunity came to her team for someone on their team to present at the company town hall. And she raised her hand. And it was
Oh, yeah.
really short notice. It was really short notice to do this. I think someone had gotten sick and couldn't do it anymore. And so in our coaching session, I was like, oh my goodness, I'd love to know what was going through your mind when you volunteered to do this. And she was like, well, Octavia, you had reminded me how important it is to keep track of the things that I enjoy and the things that I'm doing. And even though I hadn't shared that with anyone else, when the opportunity came, I knew I already had something I could share that could be helpful. And so she did it. It was amazing. The CEO of the company, who didn't know her name before, was now reaching out to her, not just to congratulate her, but to ask her if she could help another team with the project.
Wow.
All because she decided to use her voice in maybe a 3-minute slot in an internal meeting. Changed so much about the narrative about who she was and her own confidence as well. So yes, it can be so transformative, even within the spaces you're in your organization, in your industry, in your community, as well as what you choose to share more publicly online.
Definitely. Magic can happen if we put ourselves out there. See, we are talking as well now. I never knew. Yeah.
Exactly. You reached out to me after listening to something that you had heard that I shared. I
Yeah.
didn't know that it had resonated with you. We have a conversation. You ask me, would I be a guest? I say yes.
Yeah. I love that. Um, Another question I have as well. So, with building a brand on online on social media, so
Yes.
what do you see like common mistakes people make? Because sometimes I see LinkedIn is just flooded with like viral chat GPT content, etc. So how can we really be authentic within that as well?
My goodness, that is so true right now. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. I have to be completely honest, because as an author, I have to be visible. And when I first started to do that, I was absolutely terrified. And I had to start to do that before my book was available. So I was doing it just as someone who was just suddenly stepping up to share more. And when I hadn't done that before, I was just so concerned about, oh my goodness, should I, how do I, what will people think? Is it even worthwhile? Is it just there's so many people that have things to share. Why would anyone want to listen to me? It's so important to use our voice. I'll give you 2 examples. I knew that I needed a mentor, like just how I said, talk to someone who's a few years ahead of you, who's doing things you want to do, especially if you're stepping into something new. When I decided I wanted to be an author, that was a big step for me, and I'd not done this before. And I knew I wanted to talk to people that had done it before. One of those people ended up becoming my mentor. I thought it was going to be a one-time conversation. He introduced me to someone in his network. And I was really grateful. So I had a quick conversation with that person and then in his network, and that person said, hey, would you come and talk to my entire team about your book? And my first instinct was like, oh, no, 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 no. I do not want to do that. Right? That's what I was thinking in my head. But I said, of course, I'd love to. Now, that person was the editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review. And
Wow.
I was petrified because I was thinking, what could I possibly tell the team at Harvard Business Review that they don't know already? What could I possibly share? But that was the wrong way to think about it. What I actually needed to do, and this is what actually ended up happening, is I needed to share my perspective, my why, what I was doing. And that's what I did. And so I gave my presentation, and I have to admit, I was so relieved when it was over. I was just, oh my gosh, I got through it. And I sent a
Yeah.
thank you note, and I got a reply saying, Octavia, you blew us away with your warmth and your perspective. I have a question for you. And that question was, would I host a show for their platform?
Crazy.
Now, I was literally frozen. Like, here I was, so afraid to say yes to this opportunity and to share what, in essence, I was working on. And when I did it, it opened a door to an opportunity that I didn't even know existed. And so there were so many examples of that I could share with you, not just for me, but for people I've coached, where they leaned into doing something that felt uncomfortable, and either afterwards or weeks later or months later, it actually ended up being a catalyst for so much more. I'll give you one other example. I went to a birthday party earlier this month, and there was someone there who hadn't seen me since 2007. It's a long
Wow.
time. And so I was like ready to catch up. She was wanting to ask me questions about what I was doing right now, and I was really confused. And then I realized, oh my goodness, she's one of my LinkedIn connections. And she has been observing and following what I've been doing just by what I've been sharing periodically. And that was so powerful to me because sometimes you think, oh, it's the number of likes that you get or the comments. No, that's not the measure. It's actually about every time that you use your voice, you're sharing what matters to you and you're sharing who you are. And people remember whether they comment or like, they remember. I'm so glad you have a podcast because there were so many podcasts that I listen to and I learn so much from and I take down notes. And that host has no idea I'm doing that. They have no idea how much something that's shared helps me or resonates with me or helps me think about something differently, or how I then forward that link to someone else who I think also could benefit from it, because I do that all the time. There's no measure for that. Looking at number of downloads doesn't tell the full story. There's a real weight and value and power in sharing and connecting.
Wow. You made my day. I love that. That's such a great answer. And I have a question about, because I think you're fearless and you just go after every goal and you're saying yes to every opportunity.
I am not
So,
fearless. I have to tell you that. I am not fearless. That's not true.
but you still do it regardless of feeling the fear. Okay, that's the way to put it.
Well, do you know what, Sid? I think none of us are robots. And the things that can scare us can also maybe be the things that also excite us. And it's fear and excitement, but fear because we haven't done it before. All you can do sometimes is just move closer to that scary thing and it becomes a little bit less scary when you either get really close to it or you just start trying. I'm assuming this is your first podcast and the very first time that you probably tried, you hadn't done it before, right? You can read books, you can watch other YouTube videos about how to do it. And then eventually the time comes where you've got to get there and do it and show up and invite someone to join you and hit record, right? You just have to step into the arena, you know?
Definitely.
And we have all done it, especially as children. We've all done it. Taking the first day at school, riding a bike. And as we get older and older, we get much more risk averse because we're afraid of falling or stumbling or making a mistake. We are not being graded in every single second of our life. We are
Yeah,
not. But in our minds, we're thinking that way. And that's not true. No one is watching you as closely as you're thinking about yourself. No one. Nobody.
definitely. So like when we're young, we have all these big goals, like anything is possible. I want to be this, I want to be that. But when we grow up, we just stop doing that, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think we get conditioned. We get conditioned to what success should be or not wanting to make mistakes. Mistakes are really important. How else are we going to learn?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you mentioned in one of the podcasts I listened, you said, don't let fear stop you from doing anything. So, since we're talking about fear, I want to ask you, so what practical steps we can take to be fearless, push past self doubt, and go after every goal we set?
Yeah. I think sometimes you need to pause and remember a time when you did something that you didn't think you could do. And that might be something personal. It might be something professional. Go back and remember to how you felt before you did it. And then you did it. And then all of a sudden it perhaps just becomes something that, oh, I did that. And you might not even think about it with the same significance anymore because it's just something that you did. Every single one of us has huge moments. One of mine was going to university. Sounds crazy, right? I mean, I was a good student. Why should that feel like it was a big deal? I really thought I couldn't do it. It's hard to rationally explain that now. And the irony, I then years later joined a board on my university. It's how you go from thinking you're not good enough to actually someone from that institution flying to Los Angeles from England to ask you if you will do this for them. Right? But if you told Octavia when she was 17 that not only would I go to university, I would love it. It would be amazing. Just that in itself, regardless of what comes after that, just that in itself, I couldn't see it. It was so close, but I couldn't see it. Right? And then in the end, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to try. Right? That was probably one of probably the tests when I was smaller and changing schools, but that was the big one. We forget about the things that we moved through, the really tough boss that we figured out how to work around, the project that we dreaded that suddenly fell in our lap and we're like, I don't know how to do this. And then maybe you mess it up and then you learn and then you get it better, right? The first time you have to maybe speak in public, whatever the thing is, we all have them. But if you pull yourself back and don't try, or if you try and mess up and then think, okay, that's it, done now, it will never work out. The first book that I thought I was going to write never got published. I was devastated. I let that stop me for years. And then I finally had this epiphany where I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to see what happens if I don't give up. And that's when it happened. Now you can find my book in libraries around the world and in the business section at bookstores here. But I couldn't see that. And if I just stopped and stayed in that place, none of those things would have happened. And there wasn't some timeline I needed to reach. I didn't need to do X by X date. My career is mine. So I don't know why I stopped. But the fact that I did stop for so long and then decided to try again actually is the most important thing of all, the decision to try.
Love that. Octavia, honestly, is such an inspiration. Probably our listeners now as well are fired up with your story. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're so welcome.
And as you mentioned, you coach many leaders across organizations like Google, Tinder, Nike, and many more. So, what common patterns do you observe among individuals who accelerate their impact and visibility?
Oh, I love that question. Do you know, careers can be really messy, like so messy. And often how something looks, like people will look at someone in a certain position, whatever that position is, and think, oh my gosh, that person does this, and then the actual individual is like, oh my gosh, I feel stuck, or this is hard. No one knows what your career feels like. They might see a title, or who you work for, or what you've accomplished, but they don't know what it feels like. And what I learned was that very, very few people, especially once you start working, then you've been working, for a couple of years, then a few more, and then a few more, very few people have space to actually really talk about what matters most for them personally when it comes to their career. They'll have team meetings. They might have a good relationship with a manager or another senior leader that they perhaps can use a little bit as a sounding board, but there's always sometimes just a layer to that because you're co-workers, right? Or there's a professional dynamic. And so the one thing that I love about being coached, because in addition to being a coach, I continue to be coached, is that coaching gives you a space that is 100% for you. No one else's agenda, no one else's expectations. It's yours. And the reason I emphasize this is the people that get the most out of that are the people that are ready to be really honest with themselves. And then the people that don't get the most out of opportunities like that are the ones that are not ready to stop and really think about what they want to do more of, or what they need to let go of, or what they need to change in order to be more successful. Now, when I say successful, you as an individual define what success means to you. And the people that thrive the most, to answer your question, have a very clear idea of what success means for their organization, for their team, and for themselves, and the part that they play in that. And they are ready not only to do their best work, but to help make sure other people around them can do their best work also.
Now, changing gears, I want to know about AI in part of career. So, is AI a
Yes,
threat to career growth or an opportunity? Would love your perspective on this.
both. I
Okay.
think it's both. And I think there's so much that's shifting so quickly. I can't even begin to imagine how it will be impacting my work 3 years from now and the people that I work alongside. But I think it's both. You know, there's people that I coach that are telling me that, oh my goodness, we need to be showing how we're using these tools to be more productive. Because our leaders want to see that we are embracing using these tools. Some people feel really excited to do that. Some people don't want to do it at all. And I think it's important for us to become familiar with how it can add value to what we do, but also to make sure that we really value this, the connection, one to one, and really using our voices. You mentioned something when you were asking me about personal branding and AI created content that you're seeing flooding LinkedIn. The thing that makes me the saddest about that isn't so much that people are using AI to help them. I don't think that's a problem, but that they're not using their own voice as they do this. Because what you can do is start with your words and start with your connection. And I think the one advantage that we'll all have in this transition period with AI becoming more and more prevalent is the power in that one to one and interpersonal dynamic and those interpersonal skills and that connection and our networks and how we use our own voices. You know, I say to people that I coach who have been perhaps using AI to help them prepare for interviews or to work on resumes. And it's great to get, you know, a sounding board to help you fine tune something. But at the end of the day, you're going to show up in an interview. You're going to have to interact, right? And if you get hired, then yes, there'll be tools that you'll probably be using, but you still have to connect with people that you work with. And so maintaining that and there not being a huge gap between perhaps the outputs of what you've created, but also
Yeah.
your own knowledge.
So
You
true.
have to allow your knowledge and perspective to shape how you are using what you use, because then it's a double value. There's you plus the tools.
Definitely. And we can spot AI written content like that now because we're so
Yes.
used to looking at it. So I think being yourself and sharing content, being authentic is anyways we're gonna stand out. So that's a good way you said.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. And with as you mentioned with AI reshaping roles, how can we stay ahead of change and keep learning and avoid becoming obsolete in our fields or roles, according to you?
I firmly believe it's about staying curious, not just about technology trends, but staying curious about things that actually interest you. You know, often we can look at our to-do lists and they never end, right? As soon as you
Yeah.
cross one thing off,
Laundry list.
yeah, another thing comes on. I firmly believe every single person should do their own personal performance review and not just once a year. If you can do it every quarter, I think that's fantastic, where you stop and you pay attention to not just what you have done, but also what do you want to do more of or what are you curious about? It could be that it leads you to pick up a book? You and I were just talking about books before we started this
Yeah.
conversation. You have a list of things that you've already thought about, you want to read, looking ahead into the next few months. It could be that. I know I want to read more about this. Or actually, I want to listen to a podcast about this because I would want to, I'm curious about this, or I want to learn more about this, or I have this skill that I'm not using anymore. I want to find a way to use that. Maybe I can volunteer and use that skill. Or, you know what? I'm not meeting new people anymore. How can I make more connections? Whatever you're curious about, really lean into it, because with curiosity comes energy. And when you feel energized, that fuels your work in so many ways. And it can especially help you get through the parts of your work that maybe aren't as much fun for you, because we all have those. And so really lean into your curiosities. And yes, there's your to-do list, but also make
Yeah.
sure that you're paying attention to your you list, the things that are
Right.
important to you.
So you mean like having a meeting, a performance meeting with yourself and seeing what the
Yes.
things you want to do?
Yes,
Yeah,
reviewing what you've done and what you're proud of, but also just thinking about, what am I curious about? What do I want to learn, or what do I want to experience? It might be one thing, it might be a couple of things, but take time to stop and think about it, because you might have people in your circle that will ask you, but most of us don't. Most of us don't have people that are going to ask us those types of questions. So we have to ask those questions ourselves.
that's such a good point because we always have meeting with everyone else, but we never have a meeting with our own self, you know? So that's such a good point. I'm going to take this away and have a meeting with myself tomorrow and see what I need
Yeah,
to
there you go.
improve for next month. And another interesting question for you. So looking ahead 5 to 10 years, let's say. So how do you see the career landscape evolving and what skills or mindset will matter the most?
My goodness. I love that question because I have two daughters, and
Yeah.
one of them will be going to university then, the other one will be, about to getting ready to graduate. Oh my
Wow.
gosh. And so at the dinner table, we talk about this, like, oh my gosh, one of them's like, is it even worth going to university? Will I even have a career to go to? I think the most important thing as we
Yeah,
look
valid
ahead to
question
five
though. Yeah.
years, they are valid questions, but it's really looking at what excites you and what would you want to do more of, but also having resilience and adaptability. I think those are really, really, really key traits, and that matters anyway. In all honesty, look at what we went through. If we just look back 5 years ago, Sid, did any of us see a pandemic coming? No, right? Look at how all of a sudden everything what that we thought we knew got appended with no immediate checklist of how we were going to get back to normal. And it was hard. It cost a lot for so many in so many ways. But what I admired the most, just in everyday life, was seeing the adaptability and resilience that so many of us had, but didn't realize we had until the moment called for it.
And then a follow-up question. So what do you advise in terms of career planning? Should we look like 6 months ahead or year ahead? What do you advise?
I think I think it depends what stage you're in, and I'm not talking about seniority. I'm actually talking about for you personally. Sometimes there's something we've been working towards for a long time and we get it, and that's amazing. And then we have to give ourselves time to experience that and to embrace that and to start learning and growing. There are other times where we're getting restless for whatever reason. We could have been in our role for 3 months, 6 months, 6 years. The timeline isn't really important. It's more how we feel. So I think it's really important to look at your own journey and where you felt the most aligned and connected, and what you are curious about, and also who you might need to be in your corner as you're navigating that. One of the concepts I talk about in my book, Prep, Push, Pivot, is having your own personal board of advisors. And sometimes we have that informally. Personal board of advisors sounds very, very formal, but actually it might be a boss that you had that you really, really bonded with and they may no longer work with you. Maybe they moved on, maybe you moved on, but there's still someone that is in your network. Maybe it's a friend who is in a similar field to you and you support one another. Maybe it's a cousin who's always been motivational and inspiring to you, even if they're in a completely different field. Often there are people that matter to us. And then sometimes there's people we meet by chance. And then there's sometimes people that actually they don't know that they're inspiring us, but we follow what they're doing from afar and it helps us figure things out. So I think it's really important to make sure that your circle is one that's going to be motivating to you and supportive of you as you are either happy where you are and working through your next steps, or if you're feeling a little restless, figuring out what you're going to do next, because that is really magical. And, I shared one story about how one mentor opened up so many more opportunities for me than I could have imagined. That's really, really important for us all to remember because we are so used to being our own advocates all the time at work and, when we're applying for jobs and, looking for promotions. But often we need to know when other people can pour into us as well and maybe ask us a question that makes us think differently or make a suggestion that makes us think differently. And that is so valuable.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this in your brand yourself for success as well, like having a mentor, having a sponsor as well within a network. So definitely makes sense.
And we're not always in spaces where we feel like we have that support. And also if that is you, if you're like, I don't get along with my boss, that my boss is not a mentor. There isn't anyone right now that I feel that I can talk to. I encourage you to find other spaces that you can perhaps be part of. It could be that your industry has opportunities for people to come together. It could be that there's a group online where people have a Slack channel and they're
Yeah.
connecting. It could be that there's an event that's happening that you could go to without any expectations, but just be. And there can be different ways for you to get inspired or forge connections, even if there isn't someone right now who is mentoring you.
We never know like what people we meet, so it can open doors that we didn't expect for sure. And I have a question, I think final question for you before we wrap up. So you have met so many successful people along along your journey in your career. So what interpersonal skills stands out in the most successful people you have met?
Oh my goodness. Okay. One that immediately comes to mind, but these traits actually could apply to anybody who exhibits this. You don't have to be a billionaire to have these traits. But I met Miss Oprah Winfrey, and what struck me the most was her warmth and her presence, not just with me, who she didn't know before, but when she met me, she grabbed my hand, was like, "Hi, Octavia," and so warm and present, but with every person in the room. It was like she treated everybody with the exact same respect, that warmth and kindness and just interest, just right there, present, connecting. And I was in awe because when you have been given so much to others for so long and you could be retired and just be peaceful and resting, to actually to show up and connect. And I was supporting a program for her foundation that provides scholarship to students that wouldn't be going to university otherwise. And she knew every single person's name and remembered and connected. And I can only imagine how many other things she'd done in that day before she got to the space that we were all in together. And to have that, it's just innately, I think, must be within her. That was really, really inspiring to watch. So my takeaway would be for anyone, your energy is tangible. So if you're in a meeting, be present. If you're connecting with someone one on one, be present. You never know the impact that that will make. You don't have to be someone famous to be impactful. It really makes a difference.
Yes, that's so true. I think one of my podcast guests said the same thing, but it said making others feel more important. I think that's
Yes.
the same
And
thing
it's
you're saying.
exactly that. It's about the connection and yes, and I've seen on the flip side people who are in leadership roles, however you define it, who don't do that. They're distracted constantly and impatient and just thinking about themselves and what's next. And, you can tell that they had a bad meeting because they're bringing that energy into the next space that they're in. And the people that can actually compartmentalize those parts and to really just be present no matter who you are, that I think is a really
That's such
valuable and special
that's such
skill.
a valuable lesson. Thank you so much, Octavia. It's been 45 minutes. It's been amazing. So many key takeaways for our listeners. So thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love what you're doing and honored to be a guest.
Thank you. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, please comment below what's your biggest key takeaway from this episode. And I'll link Octavia's all social media handles in the show notes. And I highly recommend to buy her book as well. You have the book behind you, Prep Push Pivot.
Yes, that's my first book and my Audibles as well. You can
Yes,
find exclusively on Audible How to Change Careers and Brand Yourself for Success.
100%. And it's honestly, if you listen to that book, the audio quality and the way it's structured is just unbelievable. That's why I reached out to Octavia. It's so good. So I highly recommend to listen to it. So yeah, thank you once again, Octavia. It's been an honor, and thank you to our listeners as well.